Hello, everyone. My name is Father Christopher Brashears, and welcome to Gnarus, our program where you ask questions and I try to give you some answers based on what the church is doing, and especially things that maybe you don't understand about the liturgy or about. Well, it can be really about anything. Theology, if there are certain questions you have, go ahead and send them in. In fact, let's just pull up the call to action right now. In case you want to send in your questions, send them in to Pastor plus Gnarus at panhandlecatholic.org. And that's the easiest way then to be able to get those questions to me. I won't reveal, you can say, I'm really nervous. I don't want anyone to know that I'm asking this question. Don't worry about it, because we just do them anonymously here, and it's just to give us some questions so we can bring about an episode of show. Recently I was asked if we're going to have our guest on there. I'd mentioned it earlier on, and we're working on that. So we've got some plans rolling, and especially as people are sending in their questions, hoping to format some different options for episodes to bring in other people and special guests. Now, today's question is maybe a little challenging, and it came up a little quickly because Pope Francis released what people thought was a very shocking statement. In fact, they thought that maybe the Pope had gone crazy, maybe that the Pope really wasn't Catholic anymore. And so I want to delve into this a little bit because I think there's a lot here to it. So first of all, let's just watch the clip. Now, this is the very controversial quote. Now, first of all, to remember, this was taken, and this whole thing was made years ago. This was not even recently that he had said this. And it had been in the Vatican archives now for some time, and just a film company wanting to make this documentary about Francis decided to go in and look back through all this video and find these clips. Now, did they find clips they wanted to find? Maybe. And did they translate things a certain way? Well, I think that's going to be really clear here. So let me just cue this up.
Tienen derecho a estar en la familia. Son hijos de Dios, tienen derecho a una familia y no se puede echar de la familia a nadie. Eso ya bien posible por Israel.
Now, for the first part, I want to be really clear. I was watching this interview with one of the officials over there at the Vatican Press, and they were talking about that, how the Pope had answered these questions, but he answered them in two separate sections. So it wasn't a quote all to do with homosexual unions or anything like that. In this first part, he was talking about and answering a question in response to what happens when a child goes to their parents and says, I think I'm gay. And that's what Pope Francis said, and very lovingly, tenderly, what we see what the Pope should have said. And what he did say there was very clear, that they have a family there. And we don't kick someone out just because they may have an inclination towards sin. After all, we don't kick someone out of the family just because they say, well, I think I have a drinking problem. Or if they come and they say, I think I have a gambling problem, or some kind of other sin, and they have this sinful inclination, we don't just kick them out of the family. And that's what Pope Francis is saying. He says, you all are making a lot out of this, that somebody has these inclinations, these homosexual inclinations, these temptations, and your first thought is to kick them out of your family? He says that's crazy. And that has been the conversation of the church. Remember, after all, we don't sit there and hate the sinner. We don't get rid of the sinner. Jesus is completely about redemption. And so we're not a cancel culture. We don't kick people out. So that's kind of key to begin with. All right. Now, that's the first section. So that's where Pope Francis was saying that these people, whenever you're suffering with something like this and you come, especially to your family, then that's the place. You're supposed to have a family. And he says you have a right to a family. You have a right to continue in that you shouldn't have this kind of cancel culture about you. Now, this second part, this second question, was asked at a whole different section in the whole interview, but they kind of pieced it together to try to fit, I think, their narrative. But here's what the Pope actually said, and we'll bring up the screens. And now, if you're looking closely at the subtitles, you're going to probably say, that's exactly what he said. Careful. We'll get into the Spanish here in just a second.
Lo que tenemos que hacer es una ley de convivencia civil.
Okay, now that kind of came by a little quickly, and let me see here if I can just advance that, get us right back down to where it says it's talking about, we have to create a civil union law. Now, this is the real crux of everything, right? This is where everybody's getting upset about, and of course, the New York Times and some other newspapers are touting this as the Pope is endorsing gay unions and gay marriage. No, there's something a little more to this. Now, what we have to understand, right, is the word that he uses in Spanish. The word he uses is convivencia. He doesn't use the word unión civil to say civil union. He uses convivencia civil. Now, there's a difference in these two words. I recently read an article from an Argentinian bishop who said, no, we know what the Pope said, and this is what he was saying. No, the problem is convivencia is not a legal word. In fact, it has very broad context in Spanish. Even a get-together, like you want to have a potluck dinner or something, is a convivencia. So, and convivencia literally means con. We see that prefix there, con. It means with, and then vivencia, a livingness. So, living togetherness, togetherness. And so the Pope is saying that there really should be some kind of legal protection for those who are together, living together, that have some kind of relationship together. Now, this isn't horribly strange. In fact, I'll make a really quick parallel here that has nothing to do with any sexual disposition, and that's monks. Think about monks and nuns. They live together, and yet there should be some kind of certain legal recognition of these things. And I'll give you a prime example, one that's been used all over the place, and that is, what if one person goes to the hospital? Now, in a lot of countries, there are restrictions on who can go visit that person in the hospital. You have to be a family member, or you have to be bounded to them by law somehow. Well, okay, but if we can't support homosexual unions, and if we can't support homosexual marriage or anything to the like, Pope Francis is saying there should be something for the convivencia, these people who are living together, that there is some kind of allowances on a civil level. There should be some recognitions there of that living together. Not to say that it is a union in the same way that marriage is a union between heterosexual couples, but to say that there really is something there to give them some rights in that moment. Now, this came up largely in the debate for SCOTUS here in the United States, that there really needed to be some allowances for these cases. Now, the United States went the way of civil unions, and to really, in a strong way, really equate homosexual unions as marriage. And that was certainly not the way that the church could endorse or should have endorsed going. And so, but this convivencia is really mistranslated here, and that led to all of these news articles saying the Pope is endorsing gay marriage. He's not. And let me just kind of back that up a little bit. So Jorge Bergoglio, which we probably know more commonly as Pope Francis, he wrote this book in 2010, Sobre el cielo y la tierra. And in it is a whole book speaking about kind of the church's position and Cardinal Bergoglio's position on homosexual unions, but it had so much more. It dealt with all aspects of marriage. And so even in 2010, he was already in this book speaking against homosexual unions. He said, no, we can't have anything like marriage. That's not the point of it. But he says there is a need for recognition here, but nothing like marriage. In fact, he was a very staunch defender against marriage being only between a man and a woman. And so he did so very powerfully in Argentina when this came up as a referendum. So to say then that, he published a whole book on it, he was a staunch defender of heterosexual marriage and the idea that marriage was heterosexual, even from its basic nature. He argues very strongly for this. And to say then that, he was secretly holding on to these opinions all the time, I think that's a real far-fetched answer. Now, one of the other things that comes along to us is that the church has a very strong position on this. In fact, in 2003, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, it was brought before them to kind of bring this up. Now, this was under St. John Paul II as Pope, and then in head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith was Cardinal Ratzinger. Cardinal Ratzinger, who you might know as Pope Benedict. So under this, he brought up this. They brought this question up, and they said, now, what is it exactly that we're to do? And in the conclusion statement, paragraph 11, The church teaches that respect for homosexual persons, again, important, let's hear that real carefully. The church teaches that respect for homosexual persons, first and foremost, that's the church's position, respect. But however, this cannot lead, that respect cannot lead in any way to approval of homosexual behavior, so we can't approve of it, or to legal recognition of homosexual unions. So very, very clearly stated in 2003, and has been the clear statement of the church ever since then. So Pope Francis, 7 years later, wrote his book on it. And then he gets into this interview, and they piece it apart, and they start trying to tear apart this convivencia to mean civil unions. No, he spoke about civil unions. In fact, he said civil unions are not okay. So then now to try to conflate these issues and to pull them together, I think does a great disservice to our Holy Father. But this is what the media does, and this is what people use as propaganda and tries to create these wedges of division and tries to create these movements where there isn't one. You know, the church isn't divided on this. The church is together and unified on it. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So all of this thing, and then, you watch some of the responses to this are just outrageous. People, listen, when it comes down to it, what does the Pope really say? What does he really believe? Well, let's take him for all that he says. Take him for all that he's worth. Listen a little closer. Delve a little deeper. And not just some of these headlines that are catchy. So that wraps it up for this Gnarus edition, episode 3. Hope you all enjoyed it. And if you've got questions, again, send them in. We're happy to take them. We're going to formulate all of our episodes to answer you all's questions about the faith and otherwise. Because instead of being ignorant, we should get to know it.